Laws are like sausages. We're talking about H.R. 38, the National Reciprocity Bill, on today's AK Show. This is Alex AK Kincaid. Welcome to the AK Show. Well, most gun owners agree it would be fantastic if our concealed carry licenses were treated like driver's licenses. In other words, if I get a concealed carry permit in my home state, I can go anywhere else in the country with my concealed firearm. Unfortunately, we all know that's not the case. Congress has for years now had proposed legislation before it to make it so that we do have national reciprocity with our concealed carry permits. It's never gone anywhere. These bills have been proposed, nothing ever happens, and now we finally have a little bit of movement in the direction of being able to carry our firearms anywhere in the country if we have a concealed carry permit issued by our home state or another state. The act is 29 pages long if you print it off the official government website, and it says that as long as the state that you want to carry in has a statute under which residents of the state may apply for a license or permit. In other words, if I want to carry into a neighboring state, that state has to have a concealed carry statute where the residents of that state can apply for and obtain a concealed carry permit, and that state cannot prohibit carrying of concealed firearms by residents of the state for lawful purposes. So right now, our states do have concealed carry licensing laws. However, if you paid attention to what happened in the Peruta case this year, you know that we have a very large jurisdiction of states that fall under a federal court known as the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit said the Second Amendment does not protect a right to carry a concealed firearm. That case, of course, originated out of California. California right now supposedly allows concealed carry. They do have a statute where you can apply for a concealed carry permit, but the permits are discretionary. In other words, government officials, the sheriffs, are denying applicants the right to concealed carry. And some of those applicants complained by filing a lawsuit that went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the United States Supreme Court failed to set the record straight, to correct the Ninth Circuit and say, no, actually we do have a right to keep and bear arms outside our own homes, and you do have a right to concealed carry. That didn't happen, folks. So right now, we have federal court judges that say there's no constitutionally protected right to carry a concealed firearm. What do you think states like California are going to do if this National Reciprocity Act passes? They're going to get rid of their statutory scheme that allow people to even apply for a concealed carry permit. And they're going to say, we can do this because there is no constitutionally protected right to carry a concealed firearm. So if you think that by passing this law, suddenly we're going to be able to carry in every state in the country if we get a permit from a state that does allow concealed carry, you're wrong, because there's an out built right in this law for states like California that don't want to allow this to happen. Okay, another great thing about this bill, supposedly, is that it does away with the Gun-Free School Zones Act in a small way. It allows retired law enforcement and off-duty law enforcement officials to carry a firearm in a school zone. Sounds great, right? On top of it, there's a provision that would allow federal judges to carry a concealed firearm anywhere in the country. Okay, so those restrictions that I was talking about earlier that will apply to the rest of us don't apply to an elite group of government agents. Does that sound like a good idea to you? You may not know this about me, but I was actually what I would say somewhat privileged in a way growing up. And I don't mean I was wealthy. I came from a pretty poor family, actually. My dad was a law enforcement officer, a deputy sheriff, for over 30 years. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. There were 4 of us growing up in my household. I mean that I was privileged because I was able to hear stories from my dad, who told stories of being a cop, and I also heard stories from my grandfather, who survived World War II in Germany. So When I look at laws like this that create an elite group of citizens, and in this case, we're talking about federal judges who are restricting my right to carry and your right to carry. And when they write a law, they're giving themselves a special privilege to carry. I have a problem with that because I pay attention to history, and I've heard a lot of personal stories about history and about guns being taken away from people and about the government taking over in a really, really bad way. So I don't like this aspect of the law. And it's very similar to an issue we had in my home state of Idaho, where we had a concealed carry permitting system up until a couple years ago that accepted our politicians from the application and licensing requirements that the rest of us in the state of Idaho have to go through. How is that acceptable? The Second Amendment was not written to protect an elite group of people. It was written to protect all Americans from an overreaching government. I don't like the fact that I have to worry about what the state laws are when I travel. But I also don't want more gun control, and I don't want more separation between us as Americans in which laws apply to who. I don't think that's a good idea. Essentially, these Ninth Circuit justices who are limiting and restricting everyone in the Ninth Circuit, they're saying we're not going to have a protected right to concealed carry. Somehow they get a special set of rules that says they can carry anywhere in the country. That just isn't right. Okay, and so on top of it now, what has been tacked on to what was supposed to be a gun rights law, a fix, if you will, for Americans. We can travel with our firearms freely. If we're law-abiding Americans, we have the right to defend ourselves, and we can carry our guns with us no matter where we go if we have a license from a state. But now, on top of it, in order to get this bill pushed through, we have what's called the NICS Fix Act. And this, again, is a feel-good gun control law. It sounds really nice to some people on the surface because why wouldn't we want the background check system to work? Why wouldn't we want the data to be accurate? The problem is we know the data is very, very inaccurate. I sit with people almost every day in my office and talk to them about the troubles they have with the background check system. I have a person in my office devoted to helping people fix their records because they're wrong. The FBI has it wrong, and NICS, the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, which is run by the FBI, has their record wrong. And sometimes these records are old, they've been destroyed, we can't get copies, and most of the time it takes over 2 years to get these records straightened up. And so what happens is people go in a gun shop, they try to buy a gun, they get denied, and they're shocked because they don't know that something is wrong on their record. And then we start the process of finding out what's showing up on their record, why they got denied, and then we have to try to fix it. And right now, if you look at the FBI website, they're processing appeals for inaccuracies in the background check system from 1.5 years ago. So one of the things this bill is supposed to fix is they say, well, we're going to respond to appeals within 60 days. Not really helpful when the problem may be that the information that was reported was incorrect and we have to go back to a court or back to some other agency to correct that record. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. You know, in a law office, everything that goes on in here is privileged. So the saying is true that some of the most interesting cases that lawyers work on are hushed. We can't talk about the facts. But I had one client in particular who gave me permission to talk about his case. And he served this country for years. He was a soldier in Iraq. He came back and he had a broken back. He actually walked around the desert for 100 days with a broken back. He survived. He needed a lot of surgery when he came back. And the VA turned him in because he needed a fiduciary. In other words, someone to manage his finances while he was being physically repaired. Okay, now, there's no mental issues here. He needed physical help. And he needed somebody to actually manage his bank account and pay his bills. He had a couple of houses that needed to be tended to. So the VA sends in information to the FBI that this guy's not able to manage his financial affairs, and guess what? He goes to buy a gun and he's denied. It took over 2 years to get that mess straightened up. And this is a veteran. This is someone who's served our country, who's preserving our freedoms. He's without his gun rights for a couple of years while we get the VA to change their mind and resubmit information. And that's not an easy thing, let me tell you, because they don't want to do it. But my point is, a 60-day turnaround on appeals is not going to fix that problem, because the problem was at the VA. That was the information we had to gather and get changed. And then it's submitted to the FBI and the record is cleared up. So this is just another nuance of this bill that sounds kind of nice, but for people who do this on a daily basis and deal with this system on a daily basis, it's really not very helpful. So with a background check system that is 92% inaccurate, this NICS fix is pushing government agencies to submit more records to the FBI to be put into the background check system on the theory that we're not reporting all the information that needs to be reported. But what's actually happening and playing out in America right now, without a push for more information, is that tons and tons of misinformation is being sent to that background check system, and we're having to work harder and harder to clean it up. 92% inaccurate, that's not a good statistic. And I understand that the NRA is backing this bill. God bless the NRA. We need them. I'm a life member. I'm a proud life member. But that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that they do. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a little bit of a historian on the side. And if you look back in the gun law history, you know that in 1934, the biggest piece of federal legislation that was initially passed in this country, known as the National Firearms Act, was passed and initially proposed to include handguns being subject to attacks. Well, the NRA came forward and objected, but at the end of the day, they relented and they supported that bill if the handguns were taken out of it. What happened to it? Well, now we have this law that doesn't really do anything. It's completely outdated. And if you want to learn more about it, I wrote an article that was published in Recoil magazine. I'll put a little link to that article in my video. But that law was supported by the NRA at the end of the day. There was another piece of federal legislation that was passed in 1986 known as the Firearm Owners Protection Act. That law, again, was put forward initially as a pro-gun law. And it does have some pro-gun aspects to it, don't get me wrong. I'm not ignoring those. But it was pushed by the NRA in an effort to correct some things that were really wrong with the Gun Control Act that had been passed in 1968. So what we wound up with was a pro-gun bill that, again, imposed more gun control on us as American citizens. So do I support the National Reciprocity Act? I support the idea of national reciprocity. I cannot support more gun control being imposed on us. There is over $650 million proposed in this bill to be spent, and it's to be spent to get people to report, government agencies to report more people to the FBI. The heads of these agencies are not going to get bonuses if they don't submit the information. I mean, it's just crazy the pressure that is going to be put on government agencies to report information that may or may not be accurate. So I can't support that. I can't support a law that is spending millions of dollars of the taxpayer money to study bump stocks. That's ridiculous. I can't support a bill that is imposing more gun control on us as American citizens, and at the same time is giving a special status to federal agents, to judges, and to law enforcement. Not a good idea. We need to fix things in this country, but there's a better path to fixing them. We don't need more federal legislation. We need a Supreme Court that's going to set some people straight. That would be fabulous. We need people who are going to get active at their state level. It took us a long time in Idaho even to pass permitless carry. It took us a long time to eradicate that elite status of our politicians. But we don't quit fighting. We keep going. And in our state now, we finally have a law here where if we get a concealed carry permit, we can carry in over 40 states in this country. The states can grant each other that kind of reciprocity. And that tells me that there are 40 states in this country that are still willing to grant reciprocity to each other. States like California, if this bill passes, they're going to change their laws. I don't have any doubt about that. I mean, look at what they're doing. Look at the crazy laws that they're passing. They don't want guns there. They've been given an out in this national law, and they will take it. So I really cannot see the benefit in passing the National Reciprocity Act together with the NICS Act as these laws are presented. You know, this really isn't anything new. Laws are like sausages. I started this episode by saying that. It's in the title. The meat gets compromised through the manufacturing process. We wind up with a compromised product. That's how laws are made. Nobody should see laws being made is the point of that saying. It's not a pretty process. So stay vigilant. Thank you for watching the AK Show. Get Alex A.K. Kincaid's book, Infringed, The Gun Owner's Guide to Gun Rights. This is Alex A.K. Kincaid, and thank you for watching the AK Show.